Hello and welcome to our Game Starter online event, this time on game animation. Thank you for waiting a few minutes for us. We had to figure out some technical difficulties. I'm Johannes, and my colleague Helen and I work for Gamecity Hamburg. We're a location initiative funded by the city of Hamburg, aiming to support the games industry and its networks here in Hamburg, Germany. We do a lot of stuff like running an incubator, funding prototypes, and hosting events like this, of course. In the series Game Starter, we invite professionals from different jobs in the games industry to talk about their job profiles and their careers, to provide some insights and tips for people who are interested in starting out in the industry themselves. You can watch all episodes of Game Starter on our Gamecity Hamburg YouTube channel, and while you're at it, feel free to have a look at our website, gamecity-hamburg.de, to find out more about what we do and about Hamburg as a games industry location. Just a quick thing before we come to the actual point, which is hearing lots of interesting stuff about game animation. For other people who are watching this from Hamburg, we've got another interesting event coming up on March 29, not online, but this time once again in person. It's the Portfolio Slam Game Art on March 29, where 3 young professionals, students or freelancers will have the chance to present their portfolios on stage, get feedback from an expert jury, and win to have their portfolio presented in Page Online. If you want to join in, cheer on the slammers, hear the feedback, and network with people from Hamburg games industry, find the event on gamecity-hamburg.de/events and get your ticket. But now I'll hand over to Helen, who will quickly tell you what to expect from tonight.
Thanks, Johannes. Yeah, I'm Helen. I'm also part of the Gamecity Hamburg team. Let me walk you through tonight's schedule. So first up, we've got our welcome and introduction, which of course is happening right now. Then I'm going to introduce you to our wonderful panelists, and we're going to dive right into the discussion round afterwards. Feel free to ask questions whenever in our chat. We will read them all, either when the topic comes up during the discussion round, or we will hold on to them during the Q&A round. You can also just hold on to your questions yourself and ask them during the Q&A round, but don't worry, they will all be read and answered by a wonderful panel. The Q&A round will also commence this event, which will be over at 8 p.m. at the latest. So let's take a look at our panel. We've got 3 wonderful experts. First up, there's Seifert. He's an animation artist at Mimimi Games. Then there's Johann Kruschinski. He's a game artist at Handy Games. And last but not least, there's Hans Böhme. He's an art director at the Bild- und Tonfabrik. We also wanted to tell you, Hans unfortunately is dealing with some internet issues. We've all had them during the past 2 years, I'm sure. So if he just freezes or vanishes, it's not because he doesn't want to be here. It's just because we lost connection, unfortunately. Yeah, so let's dive right into it. First off, we would, of course, like to get to know all of you 3 a bit better. So now we know how where you work and what's your name, but we would also get to know you a bit better and asking you what's your job, how long have you been in the industry, just overall, what's your career been like, and how about Hans, while we have you, how about you start us off?
Yes, thank you, Helen, for the introduction. So yes, I started to work at BTF as an intern, and back then because my studies, I studied in Trier, a study called intermedia design, which kind of gives you general knowledge oversight over design and art in general. And back then I was kind of both into games and linear media like films and series. And I had a portfolio for both. And BTF is actually not a game studio, but was originally a film and TV production studio. And I applied there, and I just put some extra stuff in there, wanted to show them I'm also doing games. Maybe you find that interesting, and that's what probably every portfolio advisor would advise you not to do, to overload your portfolio, but I did anyways. And I happened to just get my application there when they started to do some game projects. That was the Game Royale back then, for the Neo Magazin Royale, this little additional piece as fan service, and then we started Trüberbrook. And since they needed people who were already versatile in this field and who knew a little bit about games production, I ended up making my master thesis there and then becoming part of the game department that is now like a fixed entity in this BTF company Cosmos. And we're sitting in Berlin. And since then, I've sometimes mostly been the central point in our department for art, even though I'm not the only artist. I'm the only full-time artist for most of the time, but I'm also working together with very talented people. And our team really recently grew a little bit. And yeah, we're just now tackling our next projects.
Sounds like the Bild- und Tonfabrik was the perfect fit for you.
Yes,
thank you. Kay, how about you? How did you get into the industry, and what's your career been like?
Yeah, I actually only finished my studies just about a year ago at University for Applied Sciences Europe in Hamburg. I studied game design there, doing which I also worked as a working student at InnoGames, where I did level design. However, quite early in my studies, I discovered that animation for games was the thing that interested me the most. So it was the plan from the get-go to actually get into animation. And yeah, my original plan was actually to get a master's degree or anything like that to specialize further in animation, because I felt like I wasn't good enough yet to actually get a job. However, I then found this job opening at Mimimi Games for a junior animator, and I applied, and it was just the perfect fit. Now I moved to Munich, and I'm very happy being where I am.
Of course, Hamburg is sad to have lost you, but sounds like a very great path for you. Thank you. Johann, last but not least, tell us a bit about your career. How did you end up at Handy Games?
Yeah, hi, I'm Johann, game artist at Handy Games already since 11 years. Yeah, as a kid, I always liked to draw comics, and for me, it was clear that I wanted to work in the creative field. And that's why I started my study as a graphic artist or graphic design artist in Mainz. And yeah, this was the best opportunity to dive into graphic design, layouting, but to also work in the illustration. So in the end, I somehow achieved my goal, and then I started at Handy Games as an intern. Started there to draw assets. So basically it's quite the same as drawing things for comics, and I was quite happy. And yeah, since then I'm working there and yeah, evolving together with the company.
That's how it should be, I guess. Would you mind telling us what you are working on currently?
Yeah, we're working on a new own IP. It's a quite unannounced project, and we just started. We have the German funding now for this game, and yeah, basically it's an action game, I would say, but I'm not allowed to tell you more, guys. But yeah. And yeah, our team is growing. It's one of our first bigger projects for next gen consoles and PCs. So yeah, we're growing our team, we're searching for people, and we have now even more specific fields of work. And this also means we need people for animation, for example, character animations. Before that, we worked on smaller projects. For example, I wasn't a game artist and needed to do everything by myself, but it was okay because the mobile projects were quite small. But now we see we need more professionals for certain fields.
Good to know. We're going to come back to that later on. I would like to pass this question on to Kay. What are you currently working on?
Yeah, at Mimimi, we're currently working on a new project called codename Süßkartoffel. I'm unfortunately also not allowed to say all that much about it. However, what I can say is that it's also a new IP. It's self-published, and also it's our third what is it called again? Real-time tactics game. Yeah, so we're all quite excited to work on that.
We're going to keep our eyes open then. And I think, Hans, you're also working on a very exciting project right now, right?
Yes, we just started. Like Johann said, we also got the German state funding right now. And we are working on our next adventure game, but this time it's not a point and click like in Toolbook, but a first-person adventure game. For you, who of you knows, for example, Firewatch or What Remains of Edith Finch, it's going a little bit in this direction. And the premise of the whole game is basically that it's an adventure game set in a single Berlin flat over the course of the last 100 years. And we're telling, like in Edith Finch, several episodes of this time because Berlin and Europe had such a moved history since then.
You had me at Edith Finch, so can't wait for more info on that. I'm going to pass the mic to Johannes.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I wanted to ask you a few questions more specifically about what you do in your day-to-day job. And you already all said like you do various different things and maybe not always animation, but if you do animation or when you do animation, what is it that you work on the most? Is it 2D or 3D animation? Is it assets, characters, or something completely different? Maybe Kay, you can start us off on that.
Yeah, sure. Well, with my job title being animation artist, you can already imagine that most of my tasks revolve solely around animation. Character animation, to be specific, because that's where the bulk of the workload lies with us. I've also animated some other small things here and there. I also had some weight painting tasks at the beginning when I just started out. That's done now. Yeah, so that's what I'm doing most of the time. I think one interesting fact is that we are using motion capture. We do all of that in-house, which is really exciting because we get to jump into the mocap suit ourselves and then basically beat each other up with like foam stuff and plushies and all that. So yeah, that's quite a lot of fun and also adds another interesting aspect to the job, I think, which is well, actually being physically involved yourself.
That sounds super fun, actually, yes. Johann, maybe you want to tell us what kind of animation you work on the most?
Yes, in our current projects, I am the lead artist, so I'm taking care of everything art related. And yeah, basically a game is a animation. Everything that you see is animated or is moving, and there are a lot of different fields of animation. We have frame animation or flipbook animation, where you draw one frame after another, or you have the keyframe animations where you set keyframes and something is moving. But you also have UI animation, you have effects, you have characters, you can use motion capturing, you should, or you need to animate the camera as well. And there might be something like cutscenes too. So yeah, there are a lot of fields when it comes to this topic, and somebody needs to do this. So we're making sure that we handle this, and yeah, everybody has his tasks, so to say.
Yeah, that seems like a super broad field and a super interesting thing that you need so many different skilled people for that.
Mm-hmm.
And but maybe Hans, you can fill us in how it is at your team. What do you work on the most animation-wise?
I would say normally that I work the most on 3D animations, so keyframed bone animations, and I have the biggest respect for people who do drawn 2D animation, because that's just still witchcraft for me after all those years of doing animation. Even though when you do animation properly, and if you have enough time, you mostly sketch your poses and everything before. So I do that a little bit too. And recently we had a project which is a dinosaur explanation app for little kids. And this was all 2D. And I also did the animations for the dinosaurs there, but it was kind of the same as 3D. So I also had bones and meshes for the 2D graphics that were deformed. So it followed basically the same principle. So that's what I do mostly animation-wise.
So that's falling perfectly into my next question. I was going to ask if there's even a part or part of a typical workflow in animation, or does that totally differ from project to project and from task to task?
Maybe the other guys can also tell their workflows. I think mostly for me it is that I first block out my animation in key poses, and I do this without any smooth transitions, because they're just if you have smooth transitions from the start, it looks very weird and unorganic, everything. If you just have poses, then it looks a little bit like a low FPS cartoon, and this just feels better and feels snappier. And if I have a lot of time, I even first record some references of myself on video and try to redraw poses and find action lines and everything. And then after you did this block out, you can start to gradually refine everything. And as Kay mentioned earlier, it helps a lot to have motion capture before. You can skip some parts if you had an actor already acting out that stuff. And most of your work is just the later cleanup and enhancement stuff.
I saw a lot of nodding from Kay and Johann. Maybe Johann, do you have anything to add, or do you do it like almost the same?
No, it's almost the same. When it comes to keyframe animation, of course, it's very helpful, because you, as Hans said, you just prepare your keyframes, so stiff pictures or concepts, so to say, and everything else will be generated by itself, so to say. So that's a huge help. And in the end, you just need to change some keyframes or move some bones. So it's could be an easy way, instead of just imagine you draw every picture and then you just need to change one position and you need to start from scratch. So in this regard, keyframe animation is the best way to go, I would say, for games, because you can adjust things easily, and you need to do this in something like creative games.
Yeah, thank you. And Kay, how is it for you?
Well, yeah, before I started using motion capture, not exclusively, but mostly, the process was quite similar. It's basically the same thing. One thing that I found that helped me a lot, especially while learning, was using references, and also shooting reference videos yourself, of course. Yeah, now obviously it's a bit different with motion capture, because obviously, as Hans already said, it already does a lot of things for you in the entire process. I think one thing that is different is when you iterate, sometimes that can take a little longer. At least that's what it feels like, because when you want to change one thing, for example, you say, okay, well, the beginning of this animation, maybe the character should do this instead of that. Then you have to go back, jump into the suit and record everything all over again and clean it up and all of that. Yeah, and also there's obviously the technical side of motion capture. The recording sessions require a lot of setup. After that, you have to clean up all of your data, and then as well modify the data. We do that quite a lot, actually. Sometimes the thing that we recorded ends up looking entirely different than the final animation.
Yes, and
Oops,
in the end, it's just a help, the motion capturing. Of course, people need to polish it, and you need to adjust things a lot till you have the thing that you actually want. So yeah, so we still need people who can work. So the tools, they are not replacing us. We still need creative people.
Yeah, that's like a very good sentence to conclude this. And maybe we could step back a step. We were so deep in the technical details, but maybe you could tell us how your typical workday actually looks like, and what happens after you get your first coffee until you close down all your applications and switch off your PC. Maybe Johann, you can run us through your day.
Okay. We are working with Scrum. Scrum is it's how I don't know how to explain it, but it's something how you can structure your work or your week. So once a week we meet in the group and we discuss what's next for us. So we discuss all possible topics and things, and then we plan the whole week. So everybody knows exactly what to do, and we have certain hours for certain tasks. And in the end of the week, we take a look at it and see, okay, is the task finished or not? Do we need to do something else? Or if it's good and done, then we'll pick a new task, so to say. So yeah, planning and structuring is very important for us, and this is what we do on a daily basis. So if we plan something like an animation, of course, you need to know what you want to achieve with that. So concepts might be helpful for that, quick sketches of certain character movement or something like that. So yeah, everything needs to be planned, because you just can't do something and then polish the thing out of it. At some point you need to be finished with your project or with certain tasks.
Yeah, and maybe Hans, does it look similar for you? Is it a lot of planning and sketching it out, or is your day entirely different?
Yeah, I would say it's quite similar to Johann's day. I think now everybody who watches noticed that there are some workflows that are kind of standard industry standard. We also use Scrum, and we also have a daily every day where we're talking about what we're doing. Right now, I'm kind of in between the seats because I'm doing a lot of different tasks. So it's not that I have this typical work day, but I have a lot of meetings right now. I'm doing different. We're also in a prototype phase of our project right now, so we're doing a lot of fast prototypes. So I'm basically switching my tasks every day. It could be something in Photoshop today, it could be animation tomorrow, it could be some modeling stuff after that. But yeah, usually we do it the same way, that we structure our day first. We're seeing what are the tasks we need to achieve till the next sprint. What were our problems yesterday? Are we good in time right now? And then I work till I think my work is done, my day is done, and day's work is over. And yeah, but as I said, it's hard to pin down this one flow, because right now there's just so much to do.
And Kay, how is it for you? Do you have a typical work day, or is it just as versatile and diverse as with Hans?
Well, I think it's quite similar, actually. Obviously, there's a lot of planning as well, and tracking the time of tasks and all of that. We do that a lot. Also, the daily meetings that I think almost every studio has, where you tell the team what you're planning to do for the day. What we also do is letting the team know what we are planning to do for the week. And once the week is finished on Friday, we try to recap and see, okay, how did everything go? Did we meet our goals? Did we not? Why not? What could we have done differently? Yeah, and well, a typical work day, well, it's different from day to day, I think. Recently, I've been in home office a lot, so it's usually sitting down, working on animations. Sometimes there's a meeting here, a meeting there, planning meetings, feedback meetings for myself, for other people. Yeah, and obviously then there's the motion capture days, which are the most exciting ones, because we get to jump around the room. Yeah, that's always the exciting part, I think.
Yeah, that's super interesting. It's like lots of communication and planning, and then concentrated work. And maybe if all your days are always that different in itself, but are there any typical challenges that you occur in most projects? Is it like, oh no, I ran into this in the last project, it's there again? Maybe Hans, do you have this moment?
I would say, since we were talking so much about meetings, I think the same challenges are always communication. I think the communication in the team always has to be clear and can always be better, and loops can always be there. I think it's also one of the best soft skill you can have, especially if you're entering the field, to give feedback, to receive feedback, and also to ask for feedback. And to let other people know frequently what you're doing, how your progress is, because I think everybody understands your problems if you communicate them. So if you're telling them during your task, hey, I'm having problems with this, does anybody know the answer, or had anyone ever had this same challenge? People will understand more why you might not reach certain goals, compared to if you just confront them after a time with the fact that you didn't achieve a goal. And apart from this, a very big point that I think we still have to learn is that a big amount of time of the development should be testing. Actually, you're getting features into your game, and then you have to test them over and over and iterate them, and you shouldn't cling to them too much, because probably you will change them later. And because the testing shows you that whatever you had in your mind, whatever you had on paper, doesn't work like that in the game, and you have to adjust it a little bit.
Yeah, super interesting. Like being able to kill your own darlings actually seems to be a big thing. Kay, maybe do you encounter similar challenges, or is there anything different you'd say, like, oh, that is a typical challenge in animation?
Yeah, absolutely. It's basically the same thing. I think it's, as artists, it's sometimes hard to not get too attached to the things you create, but it's important to kind of try and keep this distance to what you're working on, because in the end, it could always be that you have to change it, that the team doesn't like what you did. And yeah, it also comes, not also very much comes down to communication. And I think some animation specific and very typical challenges would be finding compromises with game design specifically. I think something that happens a lot is arguing about timing. For example, as an animator, you want to add more anticipation to a specific animation to make it more believable, to have it more like oomph, so to say. Meanwhile, the game designers want whatever's going to happen instantly. You click the button and basically it already happens. And that's one very typical challenge, I believe. And another thing that happens a lot, specifically if you have feedback meetings with a bunch of different people, that there's always different opinions. So some people prefer one version, other people very much prefer the other version, and you're in the middle of it, sitting around, just being like, well, okay, I have to do something. And in the end, you always find a solution for everything, but it can be a little hard sometimes. I think also, I just remembered one thing that was a big challenge for me personally, considering that I just started working in the industry, was that I had to learn so many new things, especially motion capture. I have barely worked with it before starting at Mimimi Games. And also there were a lot of new things that I've never animated before, specifically a lot of combat stuff. If you know the previous games that Mimimi worked on, like Shadow Tactics and Desperados 3, there's a lot of stabbing and knocking people out and dragging bodies around. And so far I've mostly worked on stuff like movement, walking, jumping, climbing. So combat was a very new thing for me.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Maybe Johann, I understood that your role also includes a lot of communicating and a lot of coordinating with the team. Are there any challenges you or your teammates encounter that you can support them with?
Yeah,
or that you typically have?
Everything's a challenge. So yeah, an animation can look good in your program or on your screen, but in the end, it needs to work in the game. So just imagine you put your animation into the game, and then, yeah, you need to work with coders and designers. They have other programs, they have other visions, they have other systems, and everything needs to work together. So yeah, in the end, maybe your animation looks good on your screen, but in the end, we just noticing, okay, the jump is too high or it's too slow. And then of course you need to adjust things. The same with coders, and then they need to adjust things as well. So maybe they need to switch into another animation faster or something like that. So yeah, it's not only about doing beautiful things, it's about doing good things in the end, and that everything's working together and that players just enjoy the game and they don't ask questions themselves, or that everything just looks as intended.
Yeah, so the game itself is a big challenge to build, yeah. And maybe just another question for this part. Do you have anything that was your most unusual or surprising task so far in animating?
Me?
Yeah.
I don't know. There are always funny stories. So as you know, games are full with bugs, and this is always funny, but unusual thing, I don't know. There are always funny things. Of course, you can put in some funny things, but then you also need to take care that it's not, I don't know. Yeah, I don't have a specific story now in mind, but game development is just fun, and yeah.
Maybe Kay or Hans, do you have anything that was like, oh, I didn't expect that I'd have to do that?
I think not something that I was assigned as a task, but when we did our campaign for Trübebrück, our Kickstarter campaign, I had to fake a lot of stuff early on because we didn't have stuff in the engine yet. So I had to do some animations as a video first. And when we just started the campaign and there was nothing much for me to do, just to boost the team morale, I took an old animation I did for the campaign video, and I just made the character look like he's drunk. And it was just something I did next to watching our campaign and being like on the edge of my seat. It's so funny how just if you just screw around with a few things, if you take this one eyelid down and kind of twist his head a little bit, your character already looks drunk, and that was quite funny. But yeah, I think also a little bit like Johann said, it's kind of those everyday things that tend to be funny or tend to be surprising. For example, when you do, I bet both of you, Kay and Johann, you both know this too. If you're doing the weight painting on your skeleton before, and you're just testing out different poses, and you're keyframing a bit more, and then you're testing this finger, and then you keyframe a bit more, and you're turning this arm to just test the how the mesh deforms. And then if you, in the end, if you scrub through the whole timeline, you have a character kind of doing this weird dance. That is very funny.
Very nice. And I think being able to animate drunkenness is a very good skill to put on your CV. Yeah, maybe one last question from me for the time being. Kay, do you have any part of the animation process you like the most?
I think it's mostly playing around with the timing, especially if you animate specific character skills or something. Just playing around with the timing, just very roughly scaling your keyframes over here and over there, and seeing what rhythm works best, where to put the beats and all that. That's the really fun part, I think.
Johann, what is it for you? Is there anything that you say like, I love this part?
Yeah, bringing something to life, actually. In the beginning, we're doing our assets. Let's say we're doing a 2D game. We're preparing asset, separate them, and put it in the engine. And then bit by bit constructing it. And then it's finally time to animate it. That's the most fun part, actually. And then you start with the first animation, and then, yeah, it becomes alive in the end. Just imagine you're doing some kind of a boss or a machine, and you're moving little parts, but in the end, it's an overall picture, and in the end, it's alive and in the game, and that's really rewarding to see that.
Yeah, thank you. That sounds super rewarding, actually. Yeah, Hans, do you want to add anything?
Yes, I think also that's exactly what makes animation my favorite part of the whole pipeline. And my favorite part of art is that if you can have those, for example, super realistic textures, and they just look like, for example, it just looks like skin, and you have this character that just looks super realistic or super believable, super appealing. But the moment you're actually animating them, I don't know what it is, but it's just the movement itself that gives the character or whatever you're animating, gives it life and makes it believable. And I just love that. And even if you have in your animation program, if you're just having super simple shading and you're just previewing everything, you can already see so much of this life in the animation, how the character moves, what the character does, just little things with which you tell the story. And I think that's also the cool thing about animation. You're actually, in the time unfolding, you're telling a story. That makes it the best part in the art pipeline for me.
Yeah, that actually sounds like it's a fun part to do. And we've got the first questions in from the chat, and one of them is about teamwork, which is a perfect bridge to what Helen has prepared to ask.
Yes, I would put the question from the chat, just push it back a couple of minutes, because first of all, well, you told us developing a game, it's hard. And luckily you don't have to do it alone. You all work in a team. But Johann, you told us you had to be quite a generalist, like you had to have a lot of hats on your head. But things have changed a bit and you're also hiring. So how big is your team right now, or how big do you want it to be in the future?
For now, we're doing a prototype of our game. We have the founding for the prototype. This will be around 1 year or 15 months. And then after that, we plan the full production. So it's going to take us several years. So yeah, of course, we start small in the beginning for the prototype. We need to figure out certain elements, test them. But yeah, when I say small, I mean that we're currently around 15 people working on the project. So we have coders, we have level designers, game designers, a lot of artists for every specific field. But yeah, when it comes to full production, we need to grow because we need to produce assets, we need to produce the whole game, and this is something that needs to be done in a short amount of time. So let's say 2 or 3 years.
But would you say you're like your team of artists? How many people is that?
Okay. Currently we are around 6 or 7. I would say 7. So in every field, we have asset creators, we have character artists, we have 3D character artists, and currently we're searching for 3D character animators as well. So yeah.
No, but 7 from 15, that's quite a lot. Quite a lot of artists on a project.
And yeah, still not enough, I would say. So, because there are fields like tech art as well. So a mix of programming and art. This is something that we need to do as well, always searching for talented people. Yep.
Awesome. Like I said, we're going to talk about openings a bit later on. And yeah, who knows, maybe we'll find the right fit for you. Hans, how about you? I would imagine maybe your team of artists is a bit smaller than 7 people, or is it around the same size?
Yes, it really depends on the project we're working on. Right now in our core team, we are 2 artists or 2 full-time artists, with our department lead being a designer, educated designer himself. So he can also jump in there, but he's mostly doing direction and writing right now. So we're 2 people, but we're also, as I mentioned earlier, we're starting this new project right now, and we're looking for a lot of open positions. So I think our art team will grow to 5 to 6 people, I think.
Okay, so similar. Okay, how about you? Like at Mimimi Games, I I would expect a bigger team of artists, but I'm here to be surprised.
Yeah, we are quite a bit bigger. I think altogether at Mimimi Games, I'm not entirely sure, but I think we are almost 40 people. And I think 10 out of us are artists. I think we also have the biggest room in the building because there's a lot of us.
Good for you. You already told us a bit about that you're working with coders and designers, but which department would you say do you work with the closest? Like whose desk should be right next to yours so you can always just holler over a question? Hans, how is it at the Bild- und Tonfabrik?
Oh, that's a very good question. I have to think about that for a second. Because I would, like, intuitionally, I would say the coders, our programmer, because I'm always asking him, or would ask him, is this okay that way? Are we implementing it that way? Can you help me with that? When I'm in Unity myself, for example. But then again, also when someone's writing something, and especially since in such an early stage and we're just trying things out, I have to communicate close to the designers and to the writers. So yeah, my intuition would say the coder, but actually it's also everything that's design.
So I would say that might be the same for you, Johann, by what you said earlier, or would you disagree?
No, I will. Yeah, I agree totally. We need to work with everyone together. So we have level designers, for example, of course, they're blocking things out. We need to know what they want to see in the game, and then we need to make a list for the asset creators, and then we need to implement it into the game. So we need to stay in contact with the coders. So yeah, everybody's involved.
That's good to hear. Kay, would you also agree, or is your experience a bit different?
I think it's a bit different, which is also because we have a few more artists. Of course, the number one person I talk to the most would be our lead animator. And closely after that, I think would probably be our VFX artists, because we have to work together quite a lot on skills that, for example, are quite VFX savvy. So we always have to be in good communication to see, okay, so if you do that, I can change it like this. And yeah, there's a lot of fine tuning in those things. But also, of course, there's the coders that I have to talk to frequently as well. But that comes more like in phases, I think, especially once I'm done with a bunch of stuff, have to implement it in Unity. I don't always need a coder to do that, but sometimes there are like special requirements or something that has to be changed for a specific animation. That happens frequently.
Oh, that's interesting that it changes a bit with the size of the company. Drum roll, please. So now we're going to get our first question from the chat. They ask, in a game dev team where you have to make a lot of compromises, who gets to make the last decision about the game? And how big of an impact does everyone from the team have? Johann, as you've worked for a long time in a team, would you take this question first?
Yes. In the team, you have normal positions like, yeah, the coder, the artist, the designer, but also you have the product owner, so to say, the manager of the project. And yeah, of course, we all can show our ideas and talk about it. But in the end, yeah, if there are any fights or something like that, or if you're not sure what to use, in the end, the product owner decides, or you can convince him or show your position. And in the end, the best idea just is the best way to go. And yeah, if there are any conflicts, the product owner decides. Yeah. Or the testers in the end, or marketing. So there's always somebody who's in charge, I would say. But yeah, everybody has some influence there.
That sounds like a fair solution, but also a necessary one, that someone gets the last word. Mm-hmm. Hans, since you also work with Scrum, I'd expect it's the same at the Bild- und Tonfabrik?
Yes, kind of. We try to be very democratic and diplomatic with how we find solutions. But I think in the end, the people having the most knowledge about a certain field also should have the final decision. So everybody can give their opinions, for example, about the level design, but the lead level designer or the most experienced level designer should have the final say in how it's going to end in the project. I think that's also a very important skill to learn over the course of your career, as Kay said earlier, that during a meeting you get a lot of different opinions, and if you are good in your field and if you're secure in your field, you need to filter what is actually going to help you, because everybody who has a criticism on your stuff has a valid point, but you have to filter out what is actually important. And in the end, especially if you're leading a department or branch inside of your company, you have to make that decision. And on the other hand, I wouldn't disagree on what Johann said. Of course, in the end, it's the people managing everything and also the testers that have the final say. If you leave out all the creative stuff, for example, the thing has to sell, kind of, and this is always a very strong argument.
Developing the ability to filter, that sounds like very good advice for our game starter audience, definitely. Thank you. Kay, would you like to contribute anything? Is the process at Mimimi Games a bit different? Like, who has the final say?
Well, I don't think I have that much to add to that. It's quite similar. One thing that is different for me personally, though, is that with animation specifically, I often get quite specific requirements. One example would be that game design requires me, if I do an animation, that the enemy has to be knocked out and lying on the ground after exactly X seconds. That could be, for example, I don't know, 5.6 seconds, something very specific like that. And then there's no way around it, no discussion, and have to do it like that. And I think quite often for us, it is game design that in the end has the final say.
All right, thank you. Since you just gave such a great example, that actually is a perfect segue into my next question. If you think about an animated asset, you just said you get a requirement, what it should do. So sorry. Could you maybe walk us through the life of an animated asset, from the concept plan to the animation? Like, who is involved in that?
Well, I think at the very beginning is probably the game designers who dictate what skills which characters have, for example. And that's the very beginning of the process. And in the end, after that, usually we as animators kind of write out a little draft, gather a few ideas for the character, try to find examples, not only for specific skills, but for the character itself, try to find some references, and then recreate the sheet that we then show to game design and a few other stakeholders, tell them our vision for that character. And then in the end, we get feedback for that. Sometimes we change a few things, sometimes we are right on point. And usually we also include some specific ideas or suggestions for animations. And then in the end, we decide on one thing that we're going to try out. We've then tried different things, different approaches. One approach that we've followed most of the time is then going into mocap, mocapping that, doing a very rough draft of the animation, of the cleanup. But sometimes we also did a rough draft, just hand keying something very, very rough, just to test if everything works, together with, for example, or the code requirements, sometimes also first VFX dummies. And after that, we start the feedback process where we get feedback for animation. Sometimes we even have to start all over from the beginning. That can happen too. But most of the time, we change some things here, some things there. Ideally, obviously, everybody says, well, that's perfect already. Keep going with that, keep polishing it, maybe change the timing over here a little bit. And it very much depends. It can go very differently for different animations.
That's quite a long life path such an asset has. Hans, would you say it goes similarly at the Bild- und Tonfabrik, or is it all in one hand?
Yeah, kind of. It goes through similar steps. I would say it really strongly also depends on the size of your team. So if you're just 1 or 2 artists in your team, steps that are, for example, concept art, maybe you just start off from some photo references instead of having concept art for your asset. And normally you would also give your character to a dedicated rigger. And if you don't have that capacity in your team, you have to do that by yourself. And I think especially for new teams, for smaller teams, people just trying themselves out or getting started, they should be curious and should also at least try to do it. You don't have to be perfect in everything. Of course, in teams as big as Mimimi games or Handy games, that's already another level, but I'm talking about teams that start out. You can get away with a lot, I think. And also there are a lot of tools out there that can help you with parts you don't want to do. There are, for example, auto riggers that help you with humanoid characters and basically do all that by themselves, and you just need very little knowledge of the rigging process. So yeah, do whatever you can, but try out whatever you can also.
Johann, anything to add to that?
Yeah, the same basically. Start small. If you need to have an animated character, just create a simple one. Make the first simple animations, and from time to time you're learning more. You can polish the things. You can use tools that makes your life easier. But yeah, at some point you need to start, and then it will evolve naturally.
All right. I would like to include another question from the chat, just because we were talking a bit about workflows and Scrum especially before. They ask, do your teams have a set amount of time available for creating animations, like a full 8-hour workday for 5 seconds of animation, or do they take as long as it needs to take? Hans, maybe you could tackle this one first.
Yeah, good question. The last time I did a really big bunch of animations, it was kind of a list of animations I had for a certain amount of time, and then I was just dividing the time by the animations, or also having some priorities there. And back then I knew that that is never gonna happen because it was just too many animations. And we just cut down as much as we could to kind of bring it to a believable estimate. So of course, in the end, if you definitely need more time for something because it just didn't work, you just need that time, and you should have that in your project planning too, a little buffer. But it also depends extremely how complex your animations are. Like some could be done in a fraction of a day. Some maybe need a full week, maybe longer. Yeah.
Makes sense. But do you do you do a package for a specific set of animations or something like that to get an estimate?
I think our estimates are mostly based on experience, but it of course helps if you try to package your tasks. So if you're not switching from animation to modeling, and then again, if you're doing animation for a certain amount of time, you will get into the flow, and it will help you to fix problems faster than always changing your mind again to another kind of way of working. Yeah, but as I said, this whole topic about how long will something take is based on a lot of experience, I guess, and it's hard to describe how we do it.
All right, thank you. Johann, I already saw you nodding along. So do you agree, or do you try to set specific times for specific tasks?
Of course, you need to plan certain tasks, but you have experience in certain fields. Of course, if you're not a junior, you know exactly how long an animation could take you. But of course, in the end, it needs to make fun, it needs to be believable, and it needs to look good. So just be prepared for some feedback loops, and in the end, it needs to work in the game. But yeah, it's mostly experience. In the end, it's near the hours that you're would think of.
All right, thank you. Kay, I'm just going to pass this question on to you as well. Do you operate the same way at Mimimi Games, or do you not rely on experience, but on a wildly different system?
Well, it's kind of both. We do plan our animations quite precisely, simply because we're just forced to do that. We have a lot of different characters that need to be animated, and we are just 2 people in the end. So that does require a lot of very careful planning. So in the end, we don't notice like 2 months before release that we haven't animated 2 characters at all, for example. So we do have to do a lot of planning that is quite precise. However, we don't have a set rule, like, for example, for 5 seconds of animation, you get X amount of hours. That, again, also very much relies on experience and on the animation itself. There are a lot of factors that dictate how long you're going to take for a specific thing. Sometimes some things take very long, specifically if you have to first motion capture everything, clean everything up, then run through a set of feedback loops, which we also plan in, of course. Sometimes we reuse other animations, which then takes a lot less time, of course. We have to then just adjust the speed of some things, change some poses. Yeah, so it very much depends. But in the end, yeah, we do quite a lot of careful planning.
All right, that's good to know. Thank you. As you all know, the Game Starter is aimed at career starters, hence the name a bit. So that's what our next main topic is going to be. And I think Johannes has some questions.
Yeah, and we all heard in the beginning that you have slightly different paths into the industry and what you studied. And I'd like to hear your opinion. What formal education does a game animator actually need? Does he need any formal education at all, or is it something you'd say like you need to have super much training on animation in university? What would you say, Johann?
I would say it's all about a good feeling for animation. Maybe you're not experienced with programs or stuff like that, but maybe you you watch a lot of animated movies or other movies, and if you have this certain kind of feel, or you know what looks good, what is believable, what is fun, it's a good starting point. And then you can start with simpler programs and dive into this topic even more.
So, Kay, would you share the opinion that it's mostly develop a feeling and then try out things, or would you say you definitely need to study something or to do an apprenticeship or something like this?
Yeah, generally, I absolutely agree. I don't think that you really need to get a specific education. Some of the best animators that I know are entirely self-taught. There are people who are crazy skilled and never went to any school or university or anything like that. In the end, I'm mostly self-taught in animation as well, because my university didn't really offer specific classes or anything in animation. But I do believe that formal education can help you, give you like sort of a framework in which you can try a lot of things. And I think specifically if you work in games, it's very beneficial if you have at least a rough idea of what everybody does. Like, what does the concept artist do? What does the programmer do? How do these things interact with each other? And how does the entire thing work? And I think in addition to that, having that framework of like some kind of school or university also helps you stay disciplined. Also, you get to work with other people. You get to try out a lot of things without any risk whatsoever, except for maybe bad grades. But in the end, I don't think that matters all that much in the games industry. I don't think anybody has ever asked me about my grades that I got at university.
I saw Hans nodding along with the part on self-taught people being crazily skilled. Do you agree, Hans, on that?
Yeah, I think it's basically for every job profile in this industry that is true. So I think especially for the artist areas, you just need a lot of practice. Just like with, for example, drawing, you need a lot of practice. The same is true for animation. Animation is, I would say, half art and half craft. So there are tools you can actually use and you need to practice them. When I started out at the university, that was kind of my first contact with art and design. I thought it is enough that I have heard of stuff. You know, I knew how to do this. Okay, fine, next thing. I knew how to do this. But what I kind of didn't get back then is that you need to practice, you need to internalize things. So doesn't matter if you do it in a context of a university, if you do it self-taught or whatsoever, but you need to practice a lot.
Yeah, maybe you can just answer my next question also, which like goes into the same directions. Do you think there are any hard skills a career starter should build up before applying or before starting their career? Is there, for example, a set of tools you should know how to use before you want to start in the industry?
For hard skills, it's really depending on what you're actually applying for. So I cannot give any recommendation for any program or whatsoever. I think you should have a good portfolio that shows that you have done stuff already and that you can prove that you can put your ideas down into an actual project, make them reality. It really doesn't depend too much which programs, which tools you use for that. If you're a master animator in Maya and we're using Blender here, you will super easily make the switch from one project, from one program to another. Especially because most programs kind of work alike. There is just some minor things that change between programs. So I think my answer to this would kind of be, you need a portfolio. You need to show that you have some way or the other have done things already.
Yeah. Johann, do you agree on that?
I agree on that. The programs, they aren't that important because, as Hans said, they work basically almost every time the same. If you have keyframe animations in Blender or in Maya, you can also use it in Unity or other programs. So in the end, the result is the most important thing. For example, if you share your animated character, nobody will ask you how you made it. In the end, the animation, the style is important. So what I want to say is, don't be afraid to apply, even though people are hiring you for Unreal instead of Unity. Just apply there because you will learn it in some weeks or months.
I saw Kay smiling on that. Is that your opinion too?
I couldn't agree more. I think I'm I'm one of those examples for just that. At university, I almost exclusively worked with Maya, and for Mimimi, I had to start working with Blender, which I had some experience in, but not a lot at all. But in the end, the most important things stay the same. Keyframes usually still work the same. The graph editor still works the same. And in the end, those are just tools. And I also got into Blender quite quickly once I started working with it. Yeah, and I think other hard skills, specifically for animation, if you want to get into that, would be one important thing to practice is the 12 principles of animation, I think. And if you wanted to boil it down even more, the things that you should maybe focus on first if you want to make progress, I would recommend would be timing and being able to create strong poses, because being good in those things can already help a lot. Also, some knowledge, at least in rigging and skinning, if you want to be an animator, is quite important. So I would very much recommend at least being able to somewhat do those things.
Yeah, thank you. That's some good recommendation what to look into when you're ogling on starting a game animation career. Early on, we talked a lot about how important feedback and communications are. Do you see any other soft skills that are essential for your job and essential for people who want to start out in a similar role? Johann, maybe?
Yeah, teamwork is important. Of course, it needs to fit. If you're just working by yourself, you will notice the consequences. And yeah, teamwork is important. Good feeling in the company or in the group, and fun. Yeah, you need to have fun on the job. Fun at your job. And that's the best motivation. If you come every day to your work and you have fun with your colleagues, and yeah, as I said, the best motivation to continue to work on a project that takes you several years.
Hans, what's your opinion? Do you want to add anything?
I really don't have that much to add, actually. I think teamwork is super important. And
oh, I think that's the moment where we lost Hans. His internet connection is not into teamwork.
Yes, but
oh, that's a pity. I hope we'll get Hans back soon. Maybe Kay, you want to jump in on soft skills for people who want to start out in game animation?
I love talking about soft skills actually. I think obviously teamwork and communicating are very important. And I think another thing to remember, especially if you're applying for jobs, is that the team you're applying at is also, well, mostly looking for somebody that they're going to sit next to for at least 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. So they will be looking for someone who fits into the team. And just being generally open can obviously help a lot. And that absolutely doesn't mean that if you're like an anxious or nervous person that you don't have chances to get hired or have less chances to get hired. Not at all, but I feel like being open about that really helps. And that's certainly a policy that we have at Mimimi Games. We are quite open about those types of things. I think the anxious artist is a stereotype that exists for a reason. I think a lot of people actually believe that they have to hide those parts of themselves because otherwise they will seem like a bad employee or like not attractive for a company. But I really think that this is changing recently, which is a very good thing, because if you're able to be open to your colleagues and tell them, hey, I'm a bit down recently, I don't know, I don't feel so good, maybe my work suffered recently, that gives them a chance to tell them that maybe you're not alone, to offer a few supportive words and all of that. And that just overall creates a very healthy working environment. And yeah, healthy and happy people just do better work. So I think that's something that should really be emphasized in teamwork and when working with other people.
Yes, that's a really important point you made. Hans, do you want to take your second chance on soft skills?
Yes, I'm incredibly sorry for my technical problems. I don't know how far I got in what I was saying till I lost connection to you. It's a big point is teamwork, and I think this a mindset of accepting other ideas and playing around with them is very important. It's something I'm trying to practice myself more, to take ideas and try how you can, or think about how you can add to them, rather than just trying to pick it apart and finding problems. Try to see it as a solution first and try to build upon it. And as I said, it's even still hard for me to do this sometimes.
And I would like to say that being open is really good or really helpful, because if you talk about your life, about your hobbies, about movies you like or games, yeah, it really opens up the the mood in the company, and people will see other strengths of you. Maybe you're just an animator, but somebody will notice that you're good at photography, and later on maybe you can design cutscenes or things like that. So don't be shy, don't be afraid. We're all humans, and especially in the games industry, we're all kind of nerds and geeks, and we have the same hobbies and interests. So it's really helpful to build a healthy environment there.
Yeah, that sounds so it makes so much sense. Yeah. It's kind of a hard cut, but Johann, as you already explained to us before, you partly hold personal responsibilities for your team, and in case you screen applications or having interviews with potential new junior colleagues, what would be points you would be looking for that would make a plus for the candidate you see?
Everything game related, actually. So of course we have concept artists that are applying with beautiful art, but we're not doing pictures in the end of the day. So make more concept for specific objects, for example. So be more specific about the topic games. So the more game related it is, the better it is. It doesn't need to be polished artworks or polished animations. Just show your ideas, show that you have fun, and in the end, that's important to see a whole collection of things that we can imagine to use for our game or show other skills as well.
And maybe to switch the perspective a little, Kay, you started pretty recently at Mimimi Games, and that was just shortly after finishing your degree. Do you have any tips for our audience? What helped you to land a job? So right after you finished your degree.
Well, I think me landing that job was also quite a bit of luck, because Mimimi happened to be looking for a lot of things that I had already done. For example, they were looking for somebody to create a lot of different diverse characters, somebody who ideally already had experience with motion capture. And I did have a bit of experience with that, worked in the industry before, which is always a plus. And also I actually, in my last year of university, actually focused very much on character animation and how to convey personality of set characters using animation. That was just an overall really good fit. And I think what I personally would draw from that is know what you want to do, know what kind of job you would like to do, and then build your portfolio towards that. I knew that I wanted to do character animation, so that's what I mostly worked on. That's what I mostly had in my portfolio. Yeah, for example, I sometimes heard of people or saw people who applied for example, concept artist jobs here and there and handed in a portfolio with a bunch of very beautiful, amazing portraits or something like that. But in the end, if the studio is looking for somebody who will design a lot of props and plants and everything, that's not going to help you a lot. And yeah, another thing that helped me personally is learning that I didn't have to put as much pressure on myself as I did before. Because I think, especially when you're starting out and trying to find a job, that can be a very scary place because you don't have a job to begin with. You're trying to sort of set foot into the games industry, which can be really hard for some people. And yeah, in the end, if you put that much pressure on yourself, you have less energy for the actual thing, for applying to jobs, for advancing in animation, because you keep struggling and spending energy trying to resist all those negative feelings you have. So trying to just, for example, I forgot the English word. Just, for example, you could do something else, try to get your mind off things, try to calm down. That's something that's helped me a lot to go into the entire process of applying much more relaxed, and which very much helped me in the long run.
Yeah, thank you. That's some great advice, actually. I have one last question I'd like to add from the chat, as we were talking about what skills or what knowledge might be important, and you all were agreeing like have some knowledge and go from there. And one person in the chat was wondering, what do you think is more important in new applicants? Having good animation experience or having a workflow experience that's fitting into your team's way of working? Maybe Johann, you can give us your opinion on that.
Both. As I said, it's always good if we see that people already worked on game-related projects. It can be a game from the university while studying, or a private one. But if you already did the whole pipeline, it's already helpful for us, and we know, okay, you know what to do. We can use you. You have a certain feeling for that, what we want to achieve, or what's connected to this. It's not only about making beautiful pictures or animations. It's about having useful things for the game in the end. And if you know, the more you know about a pipeline, the better it is, because then it's easier for us to get you into the project, into the team.
Yeah. Maybe Hans, do you have another take on that?
I think for us, it depends a little bit on what job we're actually looking for. If you're a highly specialized, for example, as an animator, it is more important for us that you have a lot of experience in animation than that you use exactly the same tools or know about our workflows, because that's something we can teach you quite quickly, our specific workflows. But to learn to be good in animation, to have done good animations, that's something that takes you a long time. So I would say, in the benefit of the doubt, it's not that important what tools you use, what your pipeline is, how deep your insight is, or how fitting your pipeline is to ours. But when you're applying to a more generalistic job, of course, if you're using all the same programs as us, if you're having the same flows, this could be a plus then too.
Yeah. Kay, what's your take?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. In the end, everybody has a slightly different workflow or a different pipeline, and it's usually never the same for any two companies. So you usually always have to get into something new and learn that. But as Hans already said, that it's only a matter of a few weeks until you get into that. It's quite easy to learn. But I think if you're just starting out, it is absolutely helpful to know about different pipelines, or well, that such a thing exists in the first place, for example. Also having learned about different workflows, and ideally also having found something that works for you, but while also being able to adjust your workflow as necessary.
Maybe a good question that just popped up in the chat to add on that, having much experience with different workflows and different things. Somebody asked, is a freelancer career in animation possible, like hopping from studio to studio? Maybe Hans, what do you think? Is that a feasible option, or is that like not really a good idea?
I think it depends on what you're aiming for. As far as I know, for animators for big movies, for example, it is even more likely to land a job as a freelancer, because I think also some of the big studios have a kind of hire and fire mentality. They're getting people for projects. And also we're teams like ours that are really small. We a lot of times look for people that are specialized in a certain field for time we need them. So yes, definitely being a freelancer on that totally works, and it may be even more successful than searching for a full-time position.
Kay, maybe you can give a different perspective from a much bigger studio or much bigger game department. What do you think? Is freelancing in game animation a feasible idea or a feasible concept?
Well, as far as I know, we don't specifically hire freelancers for game animation related things. And to be entirely honest, I don't know much about that topic and also don't have any experience of that myself. I talked to a few people who did work as a freelancer specifically for games. So that absolutely is an option. However, I think that this could possibly be also tied to a few more challenges, because being a game animator, you have to communicate quite a lot with so many different departments. And I think that might be the reason that there aren't maybe a lot of studios who do hire freelancers for animation, simply because the communication could be a little bit harder with somebody who's not on the team, specifically if they can't communicate on the fly with the VFX artist, and an hour later with the head of art, and after that with the programmer. So that could possibly be a few challenges that freelance animators for games might face. But as I said, I don't know much about this. That's just what I figured might be a little more challenging.
And Johann, what do you think about it?
Currently, we are not searching for freelancers because we want to build a team here. We want to build knowledge, use it, and also build a connection to the workers. But yeah, this is the main case for smaller projects, but we're getting bigger as well. So freelancing could be an option later on if we are out of the prototype phase and know exactly what we want. If we want a certain animation or a certain character, then it could be an option that we can hire a freelancer just for specific tasks. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I think next off we wanna ask you for a few tips specifically for people who want to start in the games industry and for people who want to start in game animation. I actually got a first question on that. When looking for a job as a game animator for the first time, maybe you remember that feeling or that situation. What would you recommend to do, or where would you recommend to look? Maybe Kay, you get some recent stuff to tell us.
Yeah, there are a few websites, like I think gameindustry.de or something like that. I don't really remember, but there are a few websites also specifically for Germany and specifically for games. Definitely have a look over there. I actually found the job opening on LinkedIn, actually, because somebody had tagged me. I didn't see it before, but somebody from my university saw that they were looking, tagged me. And then actually one of our founders reached out to me, and yeah, that's how I found it. But yeah, in the end, I think it comes down to searching the internet, but also being well connected helps a lot, because that's how I got my job, and I think that's how a lot of people get their jobs.
Maybe Hans, you got something to add on that, as you told us already that you like put a lot of stuff in your portfolio, and maybe you get a few tips where to send your portfolio, where to put it up, what to put in it, where to find people who might be interested in you.
I really don't have that much to add to what Kay just said. I think for me also being connected was a big part. I knew some people at BTF before. And I think there are some, for example, I heard Twitter, and myself are not yet on Twitter, but I heard that Twitter is also a good place to start out, being well connected there, because a lot of people post their job offers there. It's also a good tool to be well connected and get into communication fast with people. But other than that, I really have nothing to add. I think it's really this 2 points. It's being connected and searching in the internet.
Johann, do you have any specific advice on that?
Yeah, of course, it's really hard for beginners to get into the games industry. It's really hard. I know that. I had did the same thing when I started. I didn't felt like I had the skills for it. You always have some self-doubt. And yeah, of course, companies are searching for experienced people because they want to build something something professional in this regard. So my tip would be start with an internship. It's always the easiest way to get into a company or gain an experience, and the more you have, the easier it gets. So yeah, searching for internships, because yeah, starting quite fresh from university, if you're 20 years old, it's hard. So my tip, start with an internship, or start at smaller teams or smaller indie game studios. Maybe this could be a good start too. Of course, the salary may not be good, but you will gain experience and then apply somewhere else.
All right. Once someone has landed that very first job and is face to face with you, based on your experience with them, with those career starters, are there common mistakes or misconceptions about the industry, or especially about game animation, you often encounter in career starters? Hans, maybe you can start us off.
I think I have to think about this for a second. I think what many people, it's maybe not a misconception, but it's something that people don't think about, is working clean and working to work with others. So having everything organized and thinking about that you have to hand off your stuff to others eventually, and that they have to understand your setups to a certain degree, or that other people have to work with your setups. So kind of having this team-focused work in the back of your mind when you're working on your own stuff already, that is something very important, and that it's not just, your art and you're doing this thing by yourself and it's just yours. I think everything is a team effort. So yeah, keep that in mind. Even when you're, for example, doing setups in Unity, keep in mind that you try to make it understandable for everyone who picks it up after you. And everything is collaborative. Nothing is just done by you, which is also a nice thing, I think. At the beginning, everybody thinks that, or everybody wants to have their little gem in the project and point on something and say like, this is mine, that's what I completely did. And it is a nice thing to have that. But on the other hand, I think most of the things you see in games are a collaborative effort. And there's also some beauty in that people got together to do something, and it's really cool because of that.
Okay, so everyone has to be able to read your notes so they can work with that.
maybe not the notes themselves, they can be really messy, but it's, I think, again, about communication also. When you're handing off something, explaining them what you did, and if you, for example, didn't work as clean on one part, maybe tell them before, like, okay, here, this is a bit messy. I hope you can work with that. As we mentioned before, communication is key, and I think maybe everything.
Including our wonderful key visual right here. Johann, how about you? Have you encountered any common misconceptions when confronted with new hires?
I think the most important thing is that you show your interest. Don't be too shy at the beginning. Don't be too shy to ask the wrong questions, or don't be too shy that you're just a beginner, that you don't know about certain technical things, for example. So be open, ask questions. If you don't understand what LOD means, then ask it, and then you will grow with the team. So yeah, and be willing to work with others, be open, and communication is key.
That's great advice. Thanks. Okay, let's take a look at this from the other side once again. Is there anything you wish yourself you had known before entering the industry, or like during the first month when you were in Mimimi games?
Well, I'm not sure if I would say that I wish I had known that before, but something very important that I learned is absolutely what Johann just said, is that it's absolutely all right to ask questions. For example, when I started at Mimimi Games, our lead animator kept telling me over and over again, it's okay, you can ask me anything all the time. If you ask me how to do this one specific thing for the 10th time, I will tell you, it's all right. And it all came down to overall me putting way too much pressure on myself, as always, which I think quite a lot of people do. And yeah, I think that's something that would have helped me before that, learning that there's no need to do that, no need to put that much pressure on yourself. Another example was when I actually first started working at InnoGames, and also a bit at Mimimi Games as well, was that I was in total hustle mode, because at university, we always had a lot of deadlines, a lot of different tasks, and I was working nonstop. So I kept doing that at my job. And then they told me sometime in the evening, well, okay, you've been here for hours, you know, you can go home, you're allowed to do that. And yeah, I think that's something that I had to learn, something very important, to just take care of myself, because in the end, if you're constantly under pressure and sabotaging yourself, you're not helping yourself at all. You will just be miserable. Your work actually doesn't get better, obviously, when you do that. So it's very important to take some time for yourself, maybe take a break, try to work on those things that hold you back, the ways in which you're sabotaging yourself. Because once you get all of those resistances, there's nothing standing in your way, and you will progress in anything that you do much faster. I actually noticed that recently when I started painting again, because suddenly I did it not because I felt obligated to keep creating art outside of work, but just because I wanted to, and because it was a lot of fun. And I was actually almost scared because I made that much progress in a very, very short amount of time. So that just showed me that being kind to yourself really helps you incredibly much in the long run.
I think that's solid advice for all areas. Thank you for sharing that. One last question just for this main topic. You're all artists, and of course, when people apply to your jobs, they bring a portfolio. As we talked about before, Hans, you said you included everything in your portfolio, and you would not advise that to people nowadays. But what would you advise then for career starters? What should they include in their portfolio? What does a good portfolio look like to you?
I think it's something that was mentioned already earlier. If you're applying for a job, think about what are they actually looking for, and just put that into your portfolio. Back then, when I was applying for the post-production in our Cologne office, I knew that post-production for movies and being a 3D artist for games has some parts in common. That's why I did it. And it was just this little addition to my stuff where I showed, hey, I can also do animations. And also this post-production position I was applying for was very generalistic. But in general, think about what people are looking for. And if it's a character animation position, and it's, for example, some Call of Duty, for some project like this, it's kind of likely that you have to do realistic humanoid animation. And this is a really stupid example right now, but sometimes in the past games of those studios, you can already see what kind of style they're looking for and what kind of animations you do as an animator there. A lot of times it will also be in the job description. Read that, but yeah, think about what they are actually looking for, and if you can give them that, and how you can give them that.
That makes total sense. Thank you. Johann, could you add anything to that, especially like when people are fresh from university and they haven't really worked on a ton of games? What should they put in their portfolio then?
Yeah, it's really hard to get a full portfolio when you're a fresh starter. That's the hardest thing, actually. Yeah, because you don't have any experience, or if you take your time to create a portfolio, you need a lot of time. So maybe you take 2 or 3 weeks for for a nice concept or picture or animation, but then it's just one artwork. So that means you need at least maybe 8 or something like that, but that's not possible. It's hard, I know that. So that's why I would say just show simpler things as well. Show sketches, show ideas, show explorations, show your references or influences, show certain mood or style. This is something that is important as well. As I've already mentioned, not everything needs to be polished or high poly or next gen. The most important thing is that you show your creativity through your portfolio.
Thanks. That sounds way more approachable than just trying to do everything at once. Kay, how was it for you? Did you you told us how you landed this job, but did you still have to struggle a bit with your portfolio? Could you share your experience on that?
Yeah, I actually was in exactly that situation where I felt like I didn't have a lot of stuff on my portfolio. One reason for that being that some of the university projects that I worked on, I didn't get to do any animation at all, so that wasn't relevant. So obviously I didn't include that. And then there were other projects which I simply didn't like. And obviously you only want to show your best work. So it was kind of hard to find enough things. So what I also included was just a few exercises that I did in my free time. For example, a flower bag, kicking a ball, or falling down, or waving. Apparently, they really liked that in my portfolio. And what I also did, which is apparently quite unusual, but which in the end very much helped me land the job, is I had a website for my portfolio where I obviously had videos of my animations. If you scrolled further down, I also had a few 2D things, simply because I felt like I had to put in a little more, because otherwise it wouldn't be, it would have been a rather short portfolio. And what I also added at the very top of the website is a short 1-minute video of me talking about my bachelor project. In the beginning of the video, I showed myself, talked about the project for a while, showed footage of it, obviously, and that apparently very much made me stand out, and also helped the team get to know me a little bit before even talking to me, because they saw me moving, talking to them and all that. And apparently they very much liked that. Yeah, so that was a little bit unusual, but in the end, this is what made me stand out.
I saw the rest of the panel nodding along, so that sounds like great advice. Thanks for sharing that.
Yes, don't be afraid to show work in progress. That's what I wanted to say. Show creativity, show personality, and show a lot of work in progress. Sometimes we get an application or a portfolio. And then sometimes I just Google for the name, and then I maybe land on the ArtStation site and I see all the other cool things that are maybe rough, but they have more life to it. So yeah, put this as well in the portfolio, because the quicker, the smaller ideas are mostly the most interesting ones.
Yeah, I'd like to hop onto that as well. I think this very much goes for everyone, not only animators, of course, but I think especially if you want to become a concept artist, this is especially important, because for animators, of course, as well, this shows your way of thinking, the way you design things. And especially if you can explain why you made certain decisions, like I had this variant and these other, and I chose this one because following reasons. I think that's very important to show to possible employers.
Thank you. We're going to head to our very last question from us as Gamecity, which is, are there any open positions in the animation or art department at your companies right now that people watching might want to apply to? Johann, I think you mentioned before, you've got some openings.
Exactly. We are currently doing a combat-based game. So yeah, we're searching for an experienced combat character animator. So this is maybe hard for a beginner to get into it, but either way you can apply as an artist or general game artist with other simple things, because yeah, we need animations in every field. We need UI animations, for example, we need cutscene animations. So don't be afraid if your position is not on the side, just apply with your work and then we'll see.
Awesome. Kay, how about you? Is there any positions open at Mimimi Games?
We have a few positions open, unfortunately none in the art department specifically. However, we are looking for different developers and also somebody who is specialized in animation development.
All right, maybe your future animator is watching. Hans, how about you? Any openings the audience should know about?
Actually, a few, because we're also starting another project soon. I was asking my colleagues this morning, and I especially wrote it down to remember them all. We will be looking for a 2D animator that is also proficient in drawing characters, which I think is kind of a given for 2D animation. We will be looking for a 2D environment artist for this project, and we will be looking for a freelance game designer. All those positions are not yet on our website, so you can be an early bird if you reach out to us. The project will also be starting, I think, the earliest in April. And for our recent project I'm also working on, we'll be needing a senior 3D artist to help us. That's maybe nothing for most of the people in the audience here, but maybe you know someone. And we are looking for an environment concept artist as a full-time position for, I think, 1.5 years.
Awesome, thank you. We're going to link your company's website, I think, both in the chat and after this panel during the next couple of days. So keep your eyes open for that. With that being said, you asked us some wonderful questions in the chat. Johannes, do you have a particular interesting one that you want to ask first?
Oh, that's a good question. There's one tough one that comes from a person obviously looking themselves for an animation artist. This person said, from my point of view, it's quite hard to find 2D animation artists which could create high quality animations, like you see, for example, in animes or games like Cuphead. Is that a thing that is really, really difficult to master, or is there so little demand for it that people don't really specialize in it in masses, or is it just not taught maybe in universities? Do you have any idea or an opinion on that kind of thing? Maybe Hans?
I think I'm not too experienced in this whole part, but I'm thinking that it might be connected to the fact that you need to be good in two art forms, two crafts. That is, for one, being good at drawing, and on the other hand, being good in or understanding the principles of animation. And those two fields are connected, but not too much. So maybe this might pose a challenge in finding people. And also, especially this kind of Cuphead frame by frame animation is a dying art, right? We're trying to do more and more with technical tools. So maybe that's also why it's getting harder and harder to find people there. But mostly I'm just guessing here right now.
I saw Kay nodding all along with the dying art form sentence. What's your opinion, Kay?
Yeah, I very much agree on that. While I absolutely love 2D animation, I can't do it myself, unfortunately. It's true that not a lot of people are looking for 2D animation artists who do those frame-by-frame type animations. So I think that's something that can be quite discouraging, especially if you, I mean, for people who would like to maybe get into this field, especially if you then consider that you really have to be exceptionally good at drawing the human figure. You have to have a really good understanding of all the animation principles. And 2D animation is just a really, really hard thing to do. I think it's actually quite a lot harder than 3D animation. That's just my personal opinion. Correct me if you think I'm wrong. But yeah, I think all those things might contribute to it being quite difficult to find somebody who does that. But also from my experience in my university, I can also tell you that there were some classes on 2D animation. However, just one class that you have like once a week for one semester absolutely won't bring you to a point where you are proficient enough in that, that you could really call yourself an expert 2D animator who's able to take on such a big task. So yeah, it's I think it does get underestimated sometimes how difficult it really is and how much knowledge goes into being able to create 2D animations.
Johann, do you want to add something?
I don't think it's dying, but it's maybe too time consuming for the products that we doing now, because we need to be finished in a certain amount of time. An animated movie needs to be finished in 2 years. A game needs to be finished in 2 years. And this is something that it's not quite possible with if you do everything by hand. But the good part about those kind of animation is that it looks handcrafted. It's not it's timeless. It has the stylized approach. So there might be certain fields where you still can use it. For example, for effects, where you can use stylized effects and have this handcrafted approach. It could give a certain mood to a specific project if you want to do this. But we're also noticing, and we're doing it the same way, we see, okay, we want to achieve a handcrafted approach. So in this case, we cheat with new techniques and 3D as well. So maybe you will just animate everything with 3D, but then cheat with shaders or something to achieve a certain style that you used from the past, or if you want to reproduce nostalgia. So it's not dying, but it's not worth it, let's say it like that. Yeah.
Thank you. We got a very technical question at the very beginning when you were talking about also technical stuff, which is what are some pros and cons for frame animation compared to other animation styles like tree animation? I'm not sure. I think, Kay, you talked a bit about keyframe animation. Could you answer this one? You're still muted.
Oh yeah, I just noticed. Could you maybe repeat the question? I'm not sure if I fully...
Yeah, sure.
It.
What are some pros and cons for frame animation compared to other animation styles like tween animation?
Well, I don't think that I'm really qualified to answer that, because tween animation is something that I don't really do. And I think by frame animation, what the person means is probably frame by frame, which is also something that I don't do. So yeah, I think maybe one of the others could reply to that.
Hans, Johann, does one of you have any expertise to offer on this topic, or is it just not in your field?
Actually, I have to say the same as Kay. It's not in my field. I think everything kind of has its pros and cons, and it's always a thing of how much time do you have. So frame by frame animation can be better if you have the time and if you're looking for the same thing. But I also have to hold myself there back a little bit. I don't have the expertise for that.
That's totally fine. I mean, there are so many different styles. You can't know everything. But Johann, you unmuted yourself, so yes. Do you want to add?
Exactly. As I already said, you have the benefits of a handcrafted look. So if you're doing a stylized game or a 2D game, you can really work with frame animations or painted animations, because you see a lot of games that are using things for effects, for example, like a stylized fire, of course. They're painting it frame by frame, but then doing an effect out of it, animating it in the engine and putting modern effects on it, like something like a glow or changing colors, because this is something that you can animate as well. You can animate the size, the colors, movement and scale. And if you mix this with handcrafted frame by frame animation, you can create something special there. So yeah, there's still room, and we are still doing this in our new project as well. And yeah, there's still some space for handcrafted animations there.
All right, thank you.
I think I have something to add to that. I just remembered. I think that's a really good way to go to mix the two of them, because as Johann already said earlier, hand by hand, frame by frame animations have this certain feel to it, but try to have tween animations wherever you can, because it's just faster, and where you can fake it, where no one will notice. And tween animations in 2D have this very big, especially in games, this very big thing going for them, that is interactability. So if you're having an animation that is based on bones, you can actually transition animations better into each other. So if that's a feature of your game, that you need to have really fluent movement, that's actually hard to fake, or harder to do in traditional 2D animation, where every frame is drawn. And it's easier to do if you have actual bones that are run by code in the engine. So that is maybe something you might keep in mind there.
Awesome, thank you. Johannes, do you have one in mind, or can I go ahead?
I think Johann might want to add something, or
Oh, no.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I got another workflow question actually from the audience. It's what information do you need from game designers and modelers when you get an animation task or the model? So what do you get handed over as your work package and info? Maybe Kay, can you give us an insight on that?
Yeah, well, in terms of models, I'm trying to remember what that was like, because our models are essentially done already, so I didn't have to communicate with our modeler all that much recently. From game designers, though, I think I already talked about this when we talked about the workflow. First of all, I need to know how long the animation takes, at which point, which character has to be in which state, and all of those things. And in the end, what we always do is suggest a few animations, a few ideas that we have, let the game designers know. And then they will give us the go or not. Maybe a step further before that, when we start gathering ideas for that, we usually have pages in our wiki about the characters, what they're like, what the personality is like. And that's something that sometimes requires a bit more communication when I can't quite figure out who exactly this character is, because that's where I personally usually like to start. I look at the character, look at the art, look at the model, read what our writers have thought up, who this character is, what motivates them. And yeah, sometimes I require a bit more input for that. So then I will reach out to somebody from the game design or the writing team.
And maybe Hans, how is it in your team?
I think that was a pretty good summary. Yeah, you might want to get in touch with writers and game designers, and there are some technical things sometimes, not all of the times, but some technical key points you want to know from them. Timing is one of them, but sometimes even animations don't have that specific timing. But I think it's always very important to communicate or to ask for the context of the animation you're doing, so you actually know what you're doing it for, how it fits into the whole world. And this is again connected to writing, to game design. It's something that is not absolutely necessary for what you're doing, but it helps a lot.
Johann, do you want to add anything?
At the beginning, there's always one idea. So that maybe the game designer has an idea. Okay, for example, the character needs to climb. And then he asks the game animator maybe to animate it. And then you need to figure out how it works connected to the code or to know about technical limitations. So in the end, everybody's involved in somehow in the end result. And of course, there are always some loops. You can't just create something that works perfectly. You always need to plan some loops till everything works as intended.
All right. Unfortunately, we have to come to an end now, but we've got one very lovely last question from the chat, which is, what are some of your favorite games when it comes to animation? I'll give you just 1 second to think about that. And now please name your favorite game. Okay, go ahead.
I don't even need to think about that. Overwatch is literally the reason why I got into animation in the first place.
Okay, that's a great answer. Hans, can you follow that up?
Yeah, okay, so you already took Overwatch. I have to agree. Overwatch is, the animations are genius. I say maybe Crash Bandicoot 1 was a game that was maybe my first game ever. And I'm still amazed what they did in that time with the techniques. And you can already see that there were like really good animators at work. So maybe this retro title is kind of my favorite.
Also a great answer, I'd say. Johann, what about you?
I like stylized games, for example, Darksiders with extreme animations full of actions, but I also like games like Ori or Hollow Knight, so 2D games. You have this handmade frame animations, but merged with the new tools and tween animations, for example.
Lovely. I'd say our audience has some things to look at then when our live stream ends.
Yeah, that's a good a good point for me. I just want to thank you to everyone who was participating, who was handing in their questions and following the whole live stream. And the biggest thank you, of course, to you, Kay, Johann, and Hans for taking your time, sitting with us here, answer all those questions for 2 hours. That's really great of you. And yeah, for our audience, if you want to stay up to date about our other events or our next Game Starter events, actually, feel free to check our website, gamecity-hamburg.de, and you'll find our Gamecity Discord server there, which is also a great place if you want to connect to other people in the game industry and maybe ask more questions, because I'm sure there will be game artists and game animators around there too. Yeah, so the last thing that's to say is thank you, everyone, and have a good night and good evening, and see you next time.
Thank you too.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you.